So a great privilege to have Comrade Olivier here, taking a little break from his constant marching, as he's telling us, and I welcome him. Olivier will open up. He'll be speaking in English. With if he needs any supplementary translation, Bob is on hand. So thank you very much to Bob too, and over to you, Olivier.
Okay, thanks, comrade. So President Macron and the French employers are trying, and they really want to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64 and extend the number of years of contributions. This is a serious attack on the standard of living of the future retirees. It is also an attack on the right to live in retirement without having first been shattered and exhausted by work. In those sectors where the work is especially oppressive, either physically or psychologically, it constitutes an attack on life expectancy. And for the other people who are less attacked on this question of health, it's the more possibility to fall into misery. Macron is taking the end of his presidential term on this issue, and the leader of the Republican senator, Bruno Retailleau, the Republicans are the conservative party, Les Républicains, with the historical heir of the Gaullist party. Retailleau is urging Macron not to give in to trade union protests because, according to him, that would mean to abdicate. Since January 19, the day of strike and demonstration have followed one another. January 19, January 31, February 7, February 11, February 16, March 7, March 8, with the feminist strike, the first large feminist strike in France. Saturday, yesterday, national demonstration. From the second day of national action on January 31, the power of the mobilization forced the National Intersyndicale to focus on the clear slogan of withdrawal of Macron's project. And since then, it has not moved from its position, which is an important change compared to the demands of the union leaderships in 2003 or 2010, when on the same issue of pension. It is not that the union leaderships have ceased to be shy or reformist. It is the effect of the level of mobilization of the workers that locks this position. The CGT appears to be the most combative central. However, we must not be mistaken. The one thing is the fact that the CGT brings together most of the most combative trade union forces in the country. Another thing is that the leadership of the CGT has not changed. It is reformist and is seeking a way out that is not a revolutionary explosion chasing Macron. Alongside the CGT, there is the FSU, Fédération Syndicale Unitaire, and Sud, Solidaire now, which are smaller and concentrated on just certain sectors. FSU is in the education, which is a big union. Is the first union inside the education sector, and Sud and Solidaire with mainly in civil services and a big federation in rail transport. FO, Force Ouvrière, is mobilized, but it is not particularly visible. It's not. The big novelty is the presence of strong contingents of demonstrators in the procession of UNSA, who are an autonomous reformist union, and CFDT, who are ultra-reformist adapted to social liberalism. In the province, out of Paris, in the provinces, the rank and file of the CFDT comes out massively out of the workplace to demonstrate, which that had not been seen for 30 years. Often, local unions officials from the CFDT of the UNSA can have a speech in General Assembly that contrasts very much with the moderate line of the organization for decades. How is this movement of social resistance built and developed? In the sectors where the strike can have the most economic impact or visibility, such as bus transport, RATP in Paris, rail, SNCF, air transport, electricity, household waste collection, petrol refineries, dockers, there is strikes more or less continuous, more or less renewed, but it's not a full strike, and not at all. And for now, it's not the general strike. Some days we can say that at some point, some dates there had been something who can be. We can say it is the general strike, but it's not a general strike in sense something like June 36 or May, June 68. Locally, the General Assembly are strong, where the unions are structured and strong. But it is not a great movement for the moment. There is not a great movement for the present time towards local interprofessional General Assemblies. For the moment, these proposals are not taking off, and the masses are content to go massively to the central initiatives proposed by the national trade union leaderships. How can this movement win? Yes, if we overcome the reluctance of union leaders to inflict a defect on Macron, the outcome of the conflict is not primarily economic or social, but political. This means ensuring that the movement openly targets the government, the place of power, the assembly, the presidents, Palais de l'Élysée, the prime minister, Matignon. We are developing for the need of a national demonstration which will seek Macron. It's a formulation issued from the way the Gilets jaunes was speaking. How can it succeed? What are the issues at stake? Beyond the question of pensions alone, it is the whole social balance of power in France that is at stake. If Macron wins, it will be a serious setback, a defeat after which he could continue to dismantle social laws on working time, union rights, status of civil servants, and many things. It will also be a strengthening of his power that will play in all areas. Example, the question of energy production with the nuclear power. What kind of response to climate change? There is a lot of big questions like that. Who will be more in a more favorable condition for the bourgeoisie to face. What are the difficulties? What are the obstacles in face of the movement? For us, the obstacles are political. The broad masses reject this project because they know how much suffering and misery it would bring to employees and pensioners. The obstacles lies in the will to bring down Macron. Official left and trade union leadership are not shaped for that. That is to bring down Macron. But the power of the movement could do it. There is also a link with the crisis of the institution of the Fifth Republic. Macron is using all the constitutional tricks to go his way. I will tell you about the number of the articles the Constitution is using to secure his goal. 49.3, 44.7. There's another. At least 3 articles from the constitutional text Macron is using to dominate the assembly and to oblige to, for instance, so often we are saying that we are nearly in the same situation that in Germany in 1933, before Hitler coming to power, with the von Papen-Brüning Bonapartist government ruling by ordinance without the vote of the parliament. And it's something like that about the way the law is made by the poor. What will be the consequences for the unions and the working class of either victory or defeat? Victory will mean a clear balance of forces in favor of the working class and a possibility to regain all what we had been taken to the workers in the last 40 years in the neoliberal era. Victory will open the gate for the flux of workers' demands, for the reviving of unions' forces. It could open a pre-revolutionary situation or something leading that way. If Macron loses the match, if he is outed, it would open a wide political crisis, posing the question of what sort of political institution to have a society with welfare for all, jobs, health, pensions, housing, but also a good answer to climate change. All that need a radical political change. It would be time for a constituent assembly and a workers' government about which we can't now tell what will be the forms. Since 1995, with Plan Juppé, when Juppé was then the Prime Minister of Chirac, we had the same battles. May, June 2003 against Raffarin on the question of pension. We suffered a defeat. In May 2005, a clear victory of people's want in the referendum against the European Constitutional Treaty was followed by a betrayal by the left MP, the Socialist and the Green, who voted with the right in the parliament to enact the constitutional treaty. That was a clear victory followed by a political defeat. In spring 2006, a clear victory against the young, a form of young minimum wage that the government want to set, and it is the last victory we gain against the government, against the neoliberalism. In September, November 2010, against Fillon on pension again, we suffered defeat. In spring 2016, about the law El Khomri, who was against the labor code, against Hollande, we suffered a defeat. In winter 2019-2020, against Macron, again on the question of pensions, we set a status quo thanks to the COVID epidemic. Winter, spring 2023, against Macron, again the question of pension, and all the issues are, we don't know what will be victory, defeat, but we are confident about the possibilities in the situation, with the number of people involved in the demonstration, on the responding to the strike, the call to strike on the main day of action. Now we think that we must have a political initiative, something like a national march on Paris to open the possibility of victory. I will stop here, and I expect I'm not too confused for the comrade. Thanks for listening.
Oh, thank you very much, Comrade Olivier. Right, who wants to come first? Questions, discussion, points of clarification? Comrades, don't be shy. Yes, Dominic or John.
It's Dominic.
Dominic.
just a very quick question. As I understand it, the legislation is now going, is it to the upper house? The question in my mind is, what are the plans for action if this comes into law? Are the trade union leaders going to throw their hands up there and say, you know, there's nothing we can do about it, like they did in the 80s when Thatcher brought in anti-trade union laws here? Or are they going to do what the trade union rank and file forced the leadership to do in the 70s and say, we're not recognising the law and we're going to fight against it? What has any discussions gone on within the trade union movement, or what happens when it goes into law? You know, because that could be an excuse for, you know, if you like, the reformists to say, you know, well, the game's up.
Thank you, Muddy.
Well, as far as I understand things in Sweden, the age of pension was raised quite recently from 65 to 66 or 67. I don't know, I'm older than that, so it doesn't affect me. But it was done without any particular backlash, as far as I could see. I'm not sure about whether there's still a two-tiered work system. The women used to have a lower pension rate than the men. It used to be 60 in public service. And when they made men equal to women, they dropped the pension rate age for men instead of raising that for women, so that men went on pension at the age of 60. I don't know if Rolf has other memories of what's been happening in Sweden, but it hasn't, I mean, there have been other issues which have been much more important to discuss, and which have led to criticism from large groups of people. But somehow the pension rate age is not one of them, as far as I can tell. But I'm only here part of the year, so I may have missed things.
All right, thank you. Actually, I have a question, if nobody else has. I would like to ask, you know, what are the political dimensions of this struggle? One thing is, what is the position taken by the whatever the far right party, Le Pen's party is called nowadays, Le Pen's party, and the other fascist candidates who stood in the presidential election? Are they making any? Are they reaping any gains out of this? What about the left? What part is Mélenchon's party playing in this? Are they making any gains out of it? What would be the political repercussions of a victory in this struggle? And now, Ed.
Well, it's also questions. I mean, I'd be interested to know, because Olivia has described a whole series of initiatives by the working class going on over quite a long period of time. You know, demonstrations, different strikes, different movements. Is there a noticeable development of workers' consciousness as a result of this series of activities? You know, are the workers able to, you know, become more critical of their own union leaderships? You know, how influential are the union leaders, and are there steps towards challenging the kind of you know, the reformist approach of these union leaders? I must say, I remember, it was a long time ago, but when I was active in the movement in France, there was very little respect for trade unions or trade union leaders, and a lot of workers coming out on strike weren't even in unions. They just came out on the spur of the moment over a particular, over a particular issue, a particular grievance. They just organized themselves. So, I'm wondering how that pans out at the moment in France.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Olivier. There's quite a few questions there. Would you like to come back now?
I will start by the question of Madis about Sweden, because at one of the demonstration I was interviewed by a journalist of the National Broadcasting of Sweden, and she was very surprised by the level of mobilization, because she said me, but in Sweden it's natural 67, it's natural age for going to, and but perhaps now we are feeling that we did not resist to the move. and the question is, I think, for the, when I give you all the dates since 1995, since Juppé, since the Plan Juppé, the question is that people are very conscious of the stake in the consequences in everyday life, because main part of people at 55 or 60 are driven out of work, and so if you are on the jobless at 55 or 60, and you must go from 60 to 62 and now to 64 being out of work, it will be a big spread of misery for all kind of workers, always blue collar of clerk, white collar is the same, because when Macron said we must work all together later, but in fact the bosses are chasing the old workers out of work in France, and the question is, they are trying to say, okay, we are going to keep you in work, but if you accept a lowering of your wages, and is that the thing, either the people are going to jobless misery, or either the people are accepting to work until 64 with less wages. And on all the plan, on the question of health, of age capacity, of wages, people are very clear about that. Will be a downgrade, that the situation will be downgraded for everybody. And I think to answer to add that the conscience of the workers is very high about what is at stake, but the question is how to do next, because until now there has been 2 points. One was the national day defined by the Intersyndicale, which was made of calling people for demonstration and for strike. But the strike are not conceived as general strike. There's, we are striking that day, and next day it's off, and we are not trying to organize. And at the same time, now the most of the so-called combative unions like CGT are asking for people to go on renewable strikes, and that means they are not calling for general strike, but they are asking people to do it yourself in your place, and vote on your place, vote the renewable strike, and do it yourself. But we as leader, we won't take the responsibility to call for a central slogan. And that's for us, we think we are trying to develop in our argument the necessity to have a national demonstration going to the place of power in Paris. And for instance, if we were able, we said we don't need to have a strike with during long time until épuisement, until
They're worn out. They're exhausted.
Until exhaustion. Yeah. We said with a national call for 3 days everywhere for everybody at the same time, and at the same time a national demonstration in Paris with 1 or 2 million people coming to Paris, it will be over, and we will win. And but the key of this question is political, because union leaders and the left party leaders don't want to out Macron, because it is what is at stake now. It's because there were no social or economical needs, urgent needs for the bourgeoisie to harden, to restrict the things. The main object of Macron, the main goal of Macron is a political one, to strengthening his power, to enter in history like the French equivalent of Margaret Thatcher when she beat the miners in 1984. And at the same time, if he loses, it would open a great crisis, because all the constitutional tricks he's using with the 49.3 and the 44.7 was a constitutional article who organize the in a disciplinary manner all the forces are obliged to align. Are you in or are you out? Are you for? Are you against? And if, in fact, the parliament is not deciding of the law, for instance, in the Senate, the right is the majority. The right want to help Macron, but with some concession from Macron. But in fact, we can say today that Bruno Retailleau is the second prime minister of France, because you are the official prime minister with Elizabeth Borne. But in fact, Retailleau in the Senate is acting like a second prime minister. And even right-wing senators voted some amendment were increasing the hardness of the law, and they are going to help Macron. And they said to Macron, yes, be straight, don't
bend.
Don't bend, because the question is the center of the question is, what will be the balance of force in France for the next years? Are they able to win against us, or will they be defeated? And they are and people are feeling that, but after they are, I think, if we are using the what's happening, we are often using the formula by Rosa Luxemburg about mass strike. It is the revolution who is feeding politically the economical movement of the strikes. And it is very the key of the situation. So if you don't have the goal to battre Macron,
Beat Macron.
to beat Macron, you can't. You can do any renewal strike you want. You won't win. If you refuse to target the power, if you refuse to target the government, if you refuse to target Macron, you will lose. And this is where the things are for us.
Mhm.
About the question of the political forces, the Republicans, so the historical right-wing party from the Gaullist tradition, is acting with Macron in the parliament and in the Senate. Some parts of the Republicans are reluctant to go too far, because for some young guy like Aurélien Pradier, with a young guard of the Republicans, don't want to be dead for they are too young to be dead, so they don't want to be associated with this Macron law. But the big part of the Republicans are going to support Macron. But it's not enough, and even it's not enough. And if there are in the parliament, if there are some part of the Republicans who vote against or who abstain, it won't be enough for Macron to secure a majority. The National Front, the Rassemblement National of Marine Le Pen, is the only political far-right forces in the parliament, and they are making some stuff about the social inequality. They want to secure the French family, the French woman, some kind of traditional racist formula. And at the same time, at the critical point in the parliament, when for instance, at some point, they are bringing a motion de censure.
A censure motion.
Yeah, censure motion. They are bringing it, but at the main part of the time, they are quite reasonable in the parliamentary circus, because the parliament is, in the institution of the Fifth Republic, the parliament is nothing. And if the government decided you must vote that text at that date, and you won't debate as you want, you won't vote the amendments you want, you should do as I said, the parliament is nothing. It's nothing in comparison with your British parliament. So the tactic of the left, they are the honest opposition of the socialists and the Greens and the communists, but with and you are the unreasonable tactics of the France Insoumise of Mélenchon.
Yeah.
Not any better argument, because at the end of the story, the parliament, you be quiet, you be reasonable, or you be making amendment guerrilla. At the end of the game, there will be the strike of the constitutional law with 49.3, because Macron will say, now I put the responsibility of the government to the suffrage, to the vote. And the question is directly, are you against or are you for me? And if you are against me, so you are open crisis, because you will be opening crisis by making me down. So the more the time the more for instance, this evening, this morning, when I was preparing the meal, I was listening to the speech of the young leader of the National Rassemblement, Jordan Bardella. I was afraid, because it's a very good politician. He's speaking very well. He's he's dangerous because he can catch people's mood who are refusing the reform when the elections will come. But at the same time, they are just making what they need to be in the opposition, but they will not push Macron. They will, at the critical times, they will abstain. They won't vote for they won't be a real enemy for Macron at the critical time in the parliament. And even if there are 80 deputies, they are a minority, and in fact, in the parliament, you are a collection of minorities: the left, the hard right, the far right, and a relative majority from the Macronist bloc, and that is very very light. It's not, the president has not the clear majority he needs to be a real president in the Fifth Republic. The Fifth Republic can work only if there is a presidential party with a clear majority. And this is under, comment dire? Cela est sapé.
The sun, sapé.
Usé, érodé.
The worn out sunlight. Soleil, did you say?
Érodé, c'est l'érosion, tu vois.
The erosion of
the majority, and it's a question, it's a source of crisis for the power.
Thank you, Bob.
I just wanted to probe some differences between England and France on this very central question of pensions, because we've got an interesting situation here, which I'll come to in a minute. But the majority of pensions, there is a state pension in Britain, but for most working people, their pension is something that's sorted out between the union and the employer in any particular workplace or profession. So it used to grieve Dot Gibson enormously. She was secretary of the National Pensioners Convention. And in France, the state pension is an utterly significant matter. The state pension age is totally important. And it was a matter of mobilization. And you could never get the TUC here to make the state pension a matter of mobilization. It's left to individual unions to sort out basically the retirement age and the pension levels, and even the way that the pension fund was organized, because there are many different ways of organizing it. Now, the result of that is that at the moment, the government is in a terrible fix, because there are a lot of people who during the pandemic just said, sod this for a game of soldiers, and they retired quite early, and they started to draw down their pension funds. Even on a reduced basis, you can get by. And now these people, it's over 1 million of them, isn't it, are just not joining the labour force. And the government is actually planning to have a special budget to try and encourage two groups back into the labour force here. One is young parents, because the conditions, the cost of childcare here is appalling. But the other one is early retirees. They're hoping to try and get some of us to go back to work. It's a bit late in our case, Roger, but you know, there are people in their 60s who could be exploited quite effectively for the next 10 years, and they're not in the labour force. So that's the first point. Secondly, the result is that 10 years ago, there was a big battle on the pensions of state employees, public employees. And that was a big sorting out job, because I know in my union, it led to a complete turnaround in the way that the union was run. And it was interesting to be at the meetings where we organised a meeting of the left in the union in London. And a national executive member came to the meeting and said, you won't get a movement on this. And a member of my union branch said, what fucking nonsense you're talking? Why don't you piss off? And that sort of thing did lead to a big change in the union. So we're now engaged in a series of strikes on pay. So the big issue here for people is that inflation since the end of the epidemic, and people's wages haven't kept up with it. So that's the big issue people are on about here. But in both cases, the challenge, I would like to ask Olivier, you know, the question is, what's the engrenage? What's the drive, the system of cogwheels that joins the agitation that you have for a national all-out strike and the actual membership of the unions? How do you get that? How do you push that demand forward? And here, we're dealing with the, sorry, I'm going to turn my video off. It's not very good. Here, we're dealing with the political question. If the Conservative government does fall apart, and it quite clearly could, then what would replace it to represent the working class? And that's a big and difficult open question. Could it somehow come back through the Labour Party? Can anybody get a footing for something serious outside of the Labour Party? So anyway, I'll stop there.
Right. Any more comrades? Olivier, do you want to come back?
Yes. About the question of the demands of the slogans, one of the favorite game of the union tradition is to set, for instance, yes, we are against the leverage at 64, but we want the retirement at 60, return to 60. But we said, yeah, okay, anybody want to return to 60, but the present question, the main question is stop the attack of Macron. And you can have all radical demands you want. It's of any use if you are defeated by Macron, who brings the age to 64. Or so the main way by which the trickery of the union leadership is a question of the renewable strikes, because in the renewable strikes, anybody it's your fault, it's your responsibility to go on strike in your workplace. And the leadership never takes the responsibility for calling a national strike, a real general strike, and at least a national demo was centering on the power. And that's the problem is that you have a spontaneous alliance between the trade unions leadership and all the leftists. All the far left groups are they are in the fantasy of renewable strikes, and they don't put the political question on the agenda, and it's clearly only economical, and that's the problem. And all the groups, Lutte Ouvrière, NPA, the new postmodernist group, Révolution Permanente, the two land Baptist groups, they are the same. They in economical ways, not in political ways.
Right, comrades, any more? We've plenty of time, and it's opened up a whole lot of questions. We don't have to focus too narrowly just on the pensions issue. Any questions or points arising? Matthew.
Yeah, there's a few things. So thanks to Olivia for the introduction and discussion, been very useful. I mean, the thing is, it strikes me, as far as I understand it, the membership of the French unions is not that big, and therefore you're getting the mobilisations you're seeing is, at least in some part, non-members of unions who are following the unions themselves. And obviously it's quite different to what you get here. So I mean, it'd be interesting to know what the sort of mechanism is for that. Why, you get like numbers of people would follow that lead and not participate in the unions. I think there's a couple of other things that are important as well. I mean, the first one obviously is the war, because obviously this goes through into the question of the fact that Macron and the EU and the British and the rest are now spending hundreds of billions on the war. And it's directly, you can see there's a direct sort of thing. Well, the EU has said we're going to spend, however many, I think 100 billion just on making ammunition, and they're going to spend even more billions on rearming, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a direct sort of transfer into the whole question of the, well, is this coming out of the backs of the workers? Clearly it is. And the question would be, is this then coming into the issues being raised in terms of the movement? The second thing I think important, obviously, is then the recession, which is being promoted, of course, being promoted by the US Federal Reserve in particular, by racking up interest rates under conditions in which the economy itself, I mean, both in the US and the rest of the world, is in a poor state. We've just seen a bit on Friday, the collapse of the biggest bank since the Silicon Valley Bank went down on Friday, which is the biggest bank to go down since 2008. And, currently there are moves to bail this out because obviously it has a huge impact, particularly obviously into the tech sector, where tech companies have got, in many cases, millions of dollars and in some cases millions of pounds deposited with that bank, and therefore it has that impact into that sector, and therefore US government, British government, etc., talk about bailing out the customers of that bank. Now that of course is a start, because clearly the effect of the rack of interest rates, the ending of what they've been running as free, is essentially a system of pumping free money into the banks, into the banking system. And now they start charging for it. That will run through the system. And the question will be, well, what happens next in those terms? What's the impact, both economically and politically? across the world, and not, obviously everything's interconnected. Thanks.
Olivier?
Yes, there is 3 questions in what Matthew put on the discussion. About the kind of out of the question of pension and retirement age, we can say there are four ways by which the government is attacking the working class. First, there's the pension question. 2, at the same time, they are making an attack on the condition of job benefit for jobless people with the new kind of regulars for the jobless people who are put under pressure and push out of benefit. There's also a question about the young people with reform of the we name that the professional teaching. Bob, aide-moi. L'enseignement professionnel.
Professional, well, that's vocational education.
Which is a big attack on the most working class part of the youth. And we have a fourth attack. It is the new coming immigration law by Darmanin. Darmanin is coming from the right, from the Republicans. He's a very vicious man. He's openly racist, and is ready to do any tricks against immigrant people. And they are going. We must have in mind that in France, immigration is covering 1 worker in 5. 1 worker in 5 is under attack and is endangered by the immigration law. And it's a very big issue for us in France in the defense of the right of the working people. So if we gain a victory on the question of the pension, we'll be able to block the other attack. But if we suffer the defeat, it will be harder. The second question bring by Matthew is about the question of war budget. There is a big, the Lambertists and the Stalinists are making a big fuss about the big defense budget who has been voted, but a few part of the money is going to Ukraine. The big part of the budget is going to the refreshing of the strategic forces like the nuclear armament and the strategic force of France, and the capacities to be present in all places of the world, like in the Indian Ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, which is very très cher.
Costs a lot.
Yeah, it
Very
costs a lot.
expensive.
Yeah, if you want to be an imperialist with a worldwide state status, you must put money to have navies, to have air forces, and to have satellite. And so the question of Ukraine is not the motives of the big military budget, and the other reason of the it's feeding the industrial sectors, with very big in France. The armaments industry is a big part of the production, and it's a strategic sector for the bourgeoisie. So they need to be fed, and a few of that money is going to Ukraine. And for instance, the ammunition factories are not able to produce enough, so there's a lack of ammunition in Ukraine for the Ukrainian forces. And if they were really fighting against Russia, that they won't, the factory will be working 44 hours a day. It's not the case. So there's a big question about what are the effects of the recession. Until now, since the COVID crisis, the religion of the bourgeoisie was at any cost. So they were spending a lot of money. They opened the flow for money for helping the capitalist sector, and it's a paradise for bosses, France. It's you can get a lot of money from the government very easily, and after that you are able not to pay taxes because you are going to put your profit in the fiscal paradise. And but what will happen if there is a big recession, like the possibility with the crisis in the Silicon Valley Bank? I don't know, but I think since a few years, a part of the bourgeoisie is thinking to evade of crisis by the greenwashing, and there's a big part of investment in green energy, renewable, or they call
renewable.
Yeah, and I think, by the way of the capitalist response to the climate change, they are trying to escape economic crisis. And I don't know in which way a big crisis in the monetary system initiated by a crisis in America could affect that. I don't know, but for instance, there's a big political question about nuclear energy, and they are going to put a lot of money. And at the same time, there's big issue because, for instance, they said at first the nuclear plants were made for being used for 40 years, and they said, oh, it's too short, we put them to 60 years. But there's more and more incident about small fissure, cracks
Yeah.
Dans les enceintes des réacteurs.
In the immediate environment of the reactor.
So there are a lot of problem of working environment in the nuclear plants, and it costs a lot of money. So we are with people pretending to face the climate change with the beautiful nuclear energy, but this way of producing energy is very cautious, and we can have a little Chernobyl or a big Fukushima in France very easily, because we have several dozens of old nuclear plants, and a catastrophe can happen every day, and that day it will be a drama. It will be catastrophic.
Thank you. Any more comrades? I see that there's another French comrade here. Comrade Laurent, do you want to come into the discussion?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes. Olivier, tu peux traduire?
Ouais.
Bob
je ferai, si
tu veux. Bob.
Oui, Bob. Can you traduce? Because my English is very bad.
Oui, ça va?
Oui. Simplement pour dire, je suis d'accord avec ce qu'a dit Olivier sur la situation en France.
That just to say that I agree with what Olivier says about the situation in France.
Moi, je suis professeur et membre du syndicat SNES FSU des enseignants.
And I'm a teacher and a member of the SNES NFU trade union of teachers in France.
À Dijon, en Bourgogne, dans la capitale d'une région.
In Dijon, in the Bourgogne region, in the regional capital.
Il est vrai que le mouvement de masse qui a commencé en janvier sur la réforme des retraites est encore extrêmement important.
It's clear that the mass movement that started in January over the changes to the pension age are extremely important.
Il y a des hauts et des bas. Par exemple, hier, il y avait moins de monde dans les manifestations, mais il faut attendre, par exemple, les grèves de mercredi pour savoir comment cela va évoluer.
So while it goes up and down, and while it's true that the strikes at the end of last week weren't as big, we'll have to see what happens next Wednesday. It could well be much bigger.
Parce que des bataillons entiers de la classe ouvrière ne sont pas encore rentrés dans la lutte.
Because entire battalions of the working class, of the whole working class, have still not really joined in.
Les directions syndicales en portent aussi la responsabilité.
And it is the trade union leaderships also which are responsible for this.
Parce que les mots d'ordre ne sont pas assez clairs, notamment par rapport à la grève générale.
Because their slogans are not clear enough, particularly as regards the general strike.
Surtout de comment l'organiser à la base.
Pardon, répète.
Surtout comment
And above all, how the rank and file should organize.
Organize the strikes,
Yeah.
Avec des comités de grève très importants.
With strike committees, which is very important.
Avec des syndicats, évidemment, aussi.
Together with the unions, obviously.
Le temps parlementaire, le temps au Parlement n'est pas exactement le même que le temps de la lutte.
The time of parliament, le temps.
L'agenda.
L'agenda.
Ah, sorry, the agenda that they have in parliament isn't the same as the agenda in the mass struggle.
Et Olivier a raison.
And Olivier is right.
Quand il dit qu'il faudrait concentrer sur les lieux de pouvoir les manifestations à Paris avec des montées de tout le pays.
And that's Olivia is right to say that the demonstrations should concentrate on where the power is in Paris and draw from all over France.
La seule chose qu'on peut dire, c'est que rien n'est joué.
And the only thing you can say is that it's not over yet.
La jeunesse commence à entrer dans le mouvement.
Young people are starting to join the movement.
Je vois à Dijon, sur 7 lycées et une université, ils commençaient à manifester avec nous.
And last week, the 7 high schools and the university in Dijon started to organize to campaign with us.
Des universités commencent à bouger.
The universities are starting to move.
Et hier, il y avait des barricades à Rennes.
And yesterday, they actually had barricades at Rennes.
Donc, on va voir comment cela évolue. Ce qui est certain.
So we'll see how it works out. There'll be some people.
La France reste le pays des révolutions.
France is still a revolutionary country. It's the home of the revolution.
Il faut qu'elle renoue avec ses plus belles traditions.
They'll have to pick up again these old traditions.
Celle de la Commune et celle de mai 68.
The tradition of the Commune and the tradition of 1968.
Et surtout juin 1936 avec les occupations des usines.
And especially of the factory occupations in June 1936.
En tout cas, si nous allons vers une défaite, ce qui serait dramatique,
and if we see a defeat, it would be very dramatic.
Cela ouvrirait la porte à une aventure politique comme le Rassemblement national.
No, je répète.
Cela pourrait ouvrir une aventure
It could open up an adventure
comme pour le Rassemblement national.
As for the National Assembly.
Non, Rassemblement national qui pourrait prendre le pouvoir.
It could lead to calling together a national rally.
Par contre, si nous sommes victorieux,
on the other hand, if we win,
tout est ouvert pour que le monde du travail retrouve sa dignité.
Then it really opens the way for the world of work to find its dignity again.
Et avancer des perspectives.
And to advance, to put forward a perspective.
Sachant que nous n'avons pas oublié que nous sommes pour le socialisme.
That we have not forgotten and that we are in favor of socialism.
Merci.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laurent. Ed?
Well, thank you, Laurent, for that interesting contribution. And what you were saying reminded me of a question which I think I raised in a previous meeting as well. In 1968, there was the consciousness of French young people, students and young workers, went straight from one of frustration at the system to revolution. It went, there was no reformism. It exploded straight, you know, in the space of a few months from January to May 1968. It exploded into the demand and the initiative to create a revolution. And de Gaulle fled the country. I mean, the ruling class thought the game was up. And it confuses me, it intrigues me. After that experience, why do the French working class now appear to go for, you know, that their movement appears on the surface to be a struggle for reforms? What changed in the consciousness of the French working class, and how and why after after that experience, and with that generation still being alive? It's a question.
The question applies outside France too.
Olivier wants.
Jimmy.
Yeah, it's just that you just said the same thought that was going through my mind, Roger. That what happened in France in '68 was paralleled by a momentous movement of the youth right across the globe. And the youth, they were fighting the Stalinists in Czechoslovakia, they were fighting the racists and militarized police in the States. There was the so-called revolutionary insurrections in Latin America. There was a whole background of issues and movements which were affecting the youth, no matter what direction they looked at. And that's one of the questions that I wanted to ask. I want to ask one or two detailed questions before I go on. One of them is in relation to Mélenchon. Mélenchon his name has turned up on the international media and on the British media quite a hell of a lot more than what he has appeared for the last couple of years. So he's been portrayed, or either maybe not even been portrayed, just been turned to as a traditional source of somebody who can give an opposition viewpoint in some sort of coherent manner. But the question I would ask, and I apologize, I lost the beginning of the meeting, but this may have been answered earlier. Has Mélenchon any serious role to play either on this movement or on the back of this movement? And the more detailed question I wanted to ask is, there are a number of comrades that we would have had a close relationship with over the years, particularly the comrades around Bulletin Militant. Are those comrades still working with Mélenchon, and have they any influence in the movement around Mélenchon? The next questions I wanted to ask was in relation to the composition, the so-called non-political, the independent position on this issue. Have the pensioners themselves any independent organizations or national groupings that not only just create groups in the regions, but attempt to coordinate them? And the final question then is in relation to the youth, whether the youth are again developing spontaneous actions in the regions, and is there any attempt through a national student organization or a national youth workers organization to try and coordinate them together? And is there any evidence that the independent movements and pressures of the pensioners and the youth can be reflected in the leadership and in the policies of the trade unions at national level.
Right,
Bob,
Olivier. Yeah.
Bob, est-ce que tu pourrais reformuler en français rapidement ce que vient de poser comme question Jimmy, parce que j'ai pas tout saisi dans le détail.
Oh, okay.
Si tu pouvais le reformuler, mais simplement de façon.
Jimmy, go through it again and I'll translate it as you go on, right?
Jimmy?
Yeah, sorry. The first one is in relation to the status of Mélenchon. He's been promoted or attended to by the international media as a credible spokesman, and the question is his authority genuine?
Tout d'abord, avec Mélenchon, qui est présenté comme une personnalité importante, influentielle, est-ce que c'est vrai? Qu'est-ce qu'il fait? Yep. Go on. Oh.
Laurent, tu veux répondre?
Oui, 2 secondes. Vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Mélenchon, il joue son rôle de dirigeant d'un groupe politique qui s'appelle la France Insoumise.
Mélenchon plays a role as the leader of a group called Unbeaten France, France Insoumise.
Il brasse beaucoup de vent,
He produces a lot of wind,
mais dans la pratique, son groupe à l'Assemblée nationale a été assez mal vu.
but in the end, his group in the National Assembly, était quoi?
Mal vu par les travailleurs.
Is not held in high regard by workers. It's looked down on by workers.
Parce qu'il faisait de l'obstruction systématique à l'Assemblée.
Because all he does is systematically obstructs any business of the Assembly.
La NUPES, qui est la gauche rassemblée pour les élections législatives de la dernière fois, et qui la NUPES.
UPS, which was the left unity going into the last legislative parliamentary elections,
est divisée sur la tactique.
Is split on tactics.
Et Mélenchon met de l'huile sur le feu.
And il met quoi?
Il met de l'huile sur le feu.
Il aggrave les choses.
Il aggrave les choses, oui.
Yeah, it's split and Mélenchon's making it worse.
Il n'est pas un acteur d'unité.
He's not acting for unity.
En fait, il espère.
In fact, he hopes
avoir son moment à lui pour arriver au pouvoir.
That his moment will come. He hopes his time will come to take power.
Mais il n'a pas les moyens de sa politique encore aujourd'hui.
But he hasn't got the stuff. He can't do it. He won't get it today.
Donc, le sentiment sur Mélenchon est plutôt négatif dans la situation actuelle.
So the people's views of Mélenchon are more negative at the present moment.
Et c'est le Rassemblement national de Marine Le Pen.
And it is Marine Le Pen's national rally.
Selon les sondages.
To go by opinion surveys, to go by opinion polls.
Qui, proposant étant contre la réforme,
and they're against the pension reform,
pourraient tirer les marrons du feu, donc pourraient en profiter.
And they want to use that to keep their chestnuts in the fire, to profit from it.
Hélas,
sadly,
Mélenchon n'est pas le meilleur allié de la classe ouvrière en France.
Mélenchon is not the best ally of the working class in France.
Je ne sais pas si Olivier est d'accord.
I don't know if Olivier agrees.
J'approuve.
I agree.
Et donc, dans la situation actuelle, il faudrait absolument que le monde du travail retrouve une direction digne de ce nom.
And what's really urgent is that the working class, the world of work, must find a leadership worthy of it.
Et nous savons tous, comme l'écrivait Trotsky dans le programme de transition,
And we all know what Trotsky wrote in the transitional program,
la crise révolutionnaire et la crise de sa direction.
that the crisis of the revolution is the crisis of revolutionary leadership.
Le mouvement ouvrier prend conscience de sa force depuis. Le mouvement ouvrier prend conscience de sa force. Commence.
Yeah, the working class is starting to understand its strength.
Depuis les 7 premières journées d'action,
Since the first days of action,
des millions de salariés et de jeunes ont lutté.
thousands and thousands of working people and young people have demonstrated.
Ils le feront, ils ne vont pas l'oublier.
They've done it, they won't forget.
Et nous, révolutionnaires, on doit absolument être à la hauteur.
And that we revolutionaries have the absolute right to être à l'auteur.
Parce qu'ils nous feront payer très cher si nous échouons.
Because they will make us pay if we fail.
Mais je suis sûr qu'on va gagner.
That I'm sure we can win.
Voilà.
That's it.
Si Olivier veut rajouter sur Mélenchon.
Non, c'est bon.
No, okay. So that was your first question, Jimmy.
Yeah, well, the other one was a related one to that, and it was in the role of the Marxists within Mobilisations organizations as to whether or not they have any influence or perspective of influence to make it an international organization. And the answers to the comrades, there seems to be little encouragement in that situation.
Oui, sa deuxième question était si les marxistes ont une influence dans l'organisation de Mélenchon, et il lui semble que, selon ce que vous dites, ce n'est pas le cas. I think they agree.
Sadly. The final question, it's a combined question.
Yeah.
One in relation to the independent movements of pensioners and the independent movements of the youth, as to whether or not in both cases they remain localized organizations, or whether or not they can become national organizations and developing left political conclusions.
La troisième question, c'est sur les salariés et la jeunesse aussi. S'il y a un mouvement, s'il y a des organisations nationales des salariés, des retraités, et s'ils développent des organisations nationales de la jeunesse, that's it, c'est ça.
Yes, Olivier.
On va continuer comme ça, Bob, si tu peux traduire.
Oui.
D'accord. Bon, sur la question des marxistes dans le mouvement de JLM.
On the question of Marxists in Mélenchon's organization.
Le problème de la France insoumise.
The problem of unbeaten France.
C'est que, en fait, c'est une organisation anti-parti, c'est-à-dire que c'est vraiment conçu pour
the problem is it's really an anti-party organization. The whole way it's conceived,
qui est conçu pour le projet politique bonapartiste de Mélenchon président, et Mélenchon ne sera jamais président.
It's been set up for a Bonapartist project of making Mélenchon a president of the Fifth Republic.
Et Mélenchon ne sera jamais président.
And he's not going to make it.
Et donc dans la France, parce que dans la France insoumise, il y a une bureaucratie qui tombe du ciel.
So, and in la France insoumise, there's a bureaucracy which has fallen from heaven, fallen out of the sky.
voilà, qui n'est élu par personne, parce que dans
Nobody's
les
elected it.
partis traditionnels réformistes,
In traditional reformist parties,
les dirigeants ont beaucoup de défauts, mais au moins ils sont un minimum élus par des congrès.
the leadership had many faults, but at least there was a bare minimum. They got elected by the membership.
Dans la France insoumise, il n'y a aucun mécanisme démocratique de ce type.
There's no democratic mechanism of that sort in la France insoumise.
Et là, récemment, alors on a fait quelques articles sur notre site.
And you'll find some articles about that on our site.
Il y a eu un coup d'État au sommet de la France insoumise.
There has been a coup d'État in the upper ranks of la France insoumise.
Où des proches historiques de Mélenchon,
So in which those who were historically, shall we say, close to Mélenchon.
donc il y avait
Corbière,
Garrido,
Autain.
Clémentine Autain et Ruffin,
So it's a list of names, yeah,
qui ont été écartés de la direction
who were driven out of the leadership, removed from the leadership,
et qui ont été remplacés par
and were replaced by
un lieutenant aux ordres qui est Manuel Bompard.
a lieutenant aux ordres.
Comment dire, un homme de main.
Oh, and replaced by a sort of godfather. No, they've been replaced by a right-hand man, dirait-on.
Qui est Manuel Bompard.
Manuel Bompard.
Manuel Bompard, oui. Et qui est très mauvais, il est pas bon.
And it's horrible. It's not good.
Donc, par exemple, il y a quelques mois, on avait eu
A few months ago, for example,
on avait eu un écho du camarade Raymond Debord.
There was an echo of Comrade Raymond Debord,
qui avait fait le choix de tenter de travailler dans la France insoumise.
Who decided to risk it and work inside la France insoumise.
Et qui a décidé d'arrêter parce que.
And he decided to give it up
parce que c'était impossible.
He just couldn't do it. It was impossible.
Vu les conditions de fonctionnement, ça ne donnait rien.
Given the conditions that you work under there, it just wasn't anything.
Alors, il y a plusieurs forces de gauche.
So there are some left-wing forces
au sein de la France insoumise qui essayent de participer.
Inside la France insoumise who tried to join in, to participate in it.
Alors, il y a
la TMI.
un groupe. Comment?
Révolution de la TMI.
Oui, les partisans français de l'IMT.
Oh yeah, the French members of the International Marxist Tendency.
La gauche révolutionnaire.
And the revolutionary left.
Qui est la section française du CWI.
Which is the French section of the CWI.
Il y a aussi un petit groupe issu du NPA qui s'appelle la Tendance Claire.
And a little group that came out of the new Revolutionary Party,
qui s'appelle la Tendance Claire.
Which call themselves the Claire Tendency. Claire pour clarté ou Claire comme nom?
C'est un acronyme.
Bon. Claire is an acronym.
Et il y a un gros courant issu de la LCR, du NPA.
It's a big group that came out of the French USEC movement, I think. Am I right?
Yeah, oui, c'est ça. Qui maintenant a pris comme nom Gauche éco-socialiste.
Which now calls itself the Eco-Socialist Left.
Ouais. Et le POI aussi, le POI.
Alors oui, il y a une mention particulière à faire pour le POI.
And the POI, yeah. Petit point.
Le Parti ouvrier indépendant,
C'est historique. The Independent Workers' Party,
qui est
Yeah.
l'une des branches du lambertisme,
which is one of the branches of Lambertism,
qui agit comme qui est un groupe mercenaire au service de Mélenchon. On peut dire ça comme ça.
which is a kind of band of mercenaries working for Mélenchon.
La garde
Ou en-
prétorienne.
His Praetorian Guard.
Ou pour le dire plus dans un langage moderne, une société de service.
They provide his security service, to use the modern term. In modern terms, his security department.
Pour Mélenchon.
For Mélenchon.
Et par exemple, le POI offre les locaux historiques du POI pour les grandes réunions de la France insoumise à Paris.
And so they have historically big premises in Paris, which are used for meetings of the
Mais ils ont un député.
Mélenchon.
They have one deputy.
And they have one member of parliament.
Yes.
One open, but I think they have one or two more, but less open.
Yeah. Okay. Jesus.
But it's a pity.
It's a shame.
It's a shame.
Again, not, it's a problem that we're suffering from all over. Comrade Steve.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that there's a mass working class movement developing in France and in Britain as well. And we don't have that development yet in the United States. But I think one of the questions is why isn't there any international campaign tying together the struggle against the attack on pensions? Because the same thing is happening in the United States with privatization of Medicare and efforts of the Republicans, at least openly, to raise the retirement age. So, I mean, I think that the politically I'll let you train.
Sorry, have I got to translate?
Yes.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Cela soulève une question, c'est-à-dire il y a maintenant les mouvements en France et en Grande-Bretagne contre ces attaques de la part de la bourgeoisie. Moins encore aux États-Unis, mais cela doit venir. Cela soulève la question qui propose un mouvement international pour la défense de ces conditions contre ces attaques.
And one of the failures of the groups that call themselves the revolutionary left, the Trotskyist organizations, international Trotskyist organizations, is the failure to have any kind of united front perspective internationally for joint action.
Et l'un des fautes de tous les groupes qui se réfèrent au trotskisme est le refus de faire un front unique international pour une telle revendication.
For example, an international day of action to support the French working class all over the
Par exemple, une journée d'action internationale pour soutenir la classe ouvrière française.
and to tie this struggle of the French workers with the struggle going on in the United States and any other countries around the world would be a way of united front strategy or a plan of uniting the working class globally against this attack on pensions and benefits.
Cela renouerait les liens pour cette lutte internationale.
But I think the sectarianism of the revolutionary left, where they see building their party as a priority. And we had the experience in Clover, where Socialist Alternative, for example, CWI refused to get involved in supporting their comrades in South Africa as an example of the sectarianism.
Et le sectarisme, par exemple, dans l'Afrique du Sud, dans la grève, dans la laiterie Clover, la groupe de CWI a refusé de participer dans cette lutte parce qu'ils sont sectaires.
So if we could have a call from French working class organizations, unions, for an International Day of Action to support the French struggle for a general strike, to support similar actions around the world on the attacks, that would be very useful, organizing internationally to support this struggle.
S'il y avait un appel de la part du mouvement en France pour une action de solidarité internationale, cela aiderait beaucoup. Cela aiderait le développement.
And lastly, we're working on an International Day of Action for the Namibian miners, Rossi miners, who've been fired for 3 years. And we're trying to get support for an International Day of Action at all Chinese consulate embassies to rehire the Rossi miners. That's another international action that workers around the world can take up.
Et aussi, nous proposons une journée d'action internationale pour le soutien des mineurs de Rossing en Namibie, qui sont déjà depuis 3 années licenciés. Les représentants syndicaux ont été congédiés par le nouveau direction chinoise de la mine. Et nous proposons un journal d'action international à leur appui.
So, I mean, building a united fronts internationally on concrete struggles is a vehicle to reorganize and rebuild an international working class movement.
Construire un front unique international pour appuyer de telles luttes serait un moyen de développer le mouvement international.
Thank you.
Merci.
Yep, thank you, Steve. Are there any other comrades want to come into the discussion?
Olivier.
Last chance. If not, I'll ask Olivier, would you like to make some closing remarks?
I would like to make 2 ads about the youth and the organization of the retirees. Today in France, it's harder to be a young people than in '68. For instance, when I was in grammar school or student, it was very easier to find a house and to a little job to have enough to eat and to study. Today, the big difficulties for the mass of students is housing, and this is question of revenue of wages, because most part of the students are obliged to work at the same time as they are students, and it's a very new phenomenon compared to 50 years ago or 30 years ago. And by working hard in dirty jobs, it's more difficult to study and to get your diploma and to succeed. For instance, and there is a real question about the food for students. For instance, a few weeks ago, the Macron and his MPs refused to vote a law for a daily meal for any students at €1. It was a very and they and it's a big about a third or a half part of the youth, of the student youth, is facing the problem of food every day, of how to eat every day. And it's a big question. And the Macron'S said, no, we are not going to vote a law for you, the ability to have a meal at €1 the meal. It will be a very social law if it would be adopted. And for young people, there's une hatred against the Macronists, and there's a hatred about that material condition. It's very hard, but at the same time, because young people are obliged to run for jobs at the same time as they are studying, it's a big obstacle for the organization of the struggle in the university now. But at the same time, people are conscious. They know what is to be exploited, and I think there will be a lot of effect of that state of mind. At the same time, in the grammar school, the question is how to get organization, because many things are done by the government and by the administration to block any form of organization of the young people, of the grammar school pupils. And it's a big difference with the years after 68. And for instance, this week at the demo of for the 8th of March, it was a very big demonstration in Paris. And if I was, comment on dit DRH en anglais?
If I was DRH.
DRH, directeur des ressources humaines.
If I was in charge of human resources,
I will be very filled by the coming of new generations of young ladies who don't want to be exploited by bosses and patriarchate. And it's incredible. It's very inspiring to see that young people who are not ready to bow, to be quiet, and it's very inspiring. And so if in the coming weeks, in the coming days, if we succeed to have a youth movement inside the present movement, it will be the way of the victory, because it will be very significant. And the other point is about the organization of retirees. The CGT has a big organization of retirees, of pensioners, and but it's not enough. The other organization, Force Ouvrière, FSU, also had a retirees organization, but not so big as the CGT. But there's a lot to do to organize people for the when they are pensioners to continue the union struggle. But the CGT has a big capital in that field.
Okay. Yes, Bob.
Sorry, and I must add, I didn't complete translating for Steve. That last point he made about the shop stewards and the committee of the Mine Workers Union of Namibia at Rossing, which is now run by a Chinese company, which sacked them all, sacked all the shop stewards committee. Steve is proposing that we pick a day and that we picket Chinese embassies and consulates wherever we can in an international day of action on behalf of the Rossing trade unionists. So it was much, in other words, he was making a much firmer proposal.
Yeah.
And, along those lines.
Actually, that's the subject of our meeting next week. The struggle of the Rossing miners, and also, as well as a representative of Rossing miners of Namibia, also an expert on the Chinese investment practices and Chinese brutal exploitation of workers in Rossing and elsewhere. A certain Patrick Bond, who apparently is writing a book on the subject. So that's very, very appropriate. So that links in very well with
Okay.
discussion.
Thanks.
Okay. I don't know. Is there any further comments from Olivier or Laurent? If not, I'll say thank you. It's been a really, really important discussion, and thanks to the comrades who participated, comrades Olivier and Laurent, and of course to Bob for his hard work, which is really without which the meeting would not have been as successful. So thank you so much. One other thing that I need to announce to the comrades is WIN has an occasional journal called On the Brink, and the latest issue of On the Brink has just been produced. It's available online, both on our website, the WIN website, and also on the WIN Facebook page. There will also be a printed version available within a few days. I'd like to say also that apart from it's quite a bulky issue with articles from all over the world, but also there's a supplement, a kind of pull-out supplement called Labour's Coming Split, about the situation in Britain. So both of those are available. As I say, do please read them. I'll be sending out the links in the notice of next week's meeting. But I hope comrades will have a look at them in the meantime. So if there's any other points that any comrades want to raise, if not, thanks to comrades for their attendance and their participation, and we'll close the meeting. Thank you. Bye, comrades.